Welcome on how to accelerate business value delivery with behavior-driven development. Hello, I'm Ken Pugh. Let's look at the flow of business value in a typical organization. You decide you're going to do something small like a feature or story. You may do a little bit of analysis to understand that feature or story, a little bit of design, a little bit of coding, some testing, deploying, and finally executing in production. And you get the flow from the decision to production. Now, if it were only that simple, what happens? Well, we get breaks in the flow as we get a loopback from test to code because of defects. We also get a loopback from test back to analyze because we realize that the requirements have not been well understood. And finally, we get loopbacks from production backwards. And all of these slow down the flow of business value. Now, why do we have these flow issues? Well, your organization may have their own particular issues. Here are some that have been reported to me. No detailed requirements, unclear business rules, poorly defined acceptance criteria, defects hold up deployment, and finally, not enough testers. What's the cost of these flow issues? Well, here's a graph. And if we consider the effort, if we find an issue with requirements at requirement time, we'll call that a 1. If we don't find the issue until coding, we're going to call that a 4. If the issue is not discovered until the testing, that's going to be a 16 because now we have to fill out a defect card, triage them, and have meetings on them. And finally, if we don't find the issue until we get to production, that could be a 64. Now, some places have done the measurements, and they found it's even a 250 times the effort for a production issue versus a requirement issue. One of the reasons these issues occur is because the developer, tester, and customer are in their own silos. And what we like to do is change the relationship between these three parties and turn them into what I call the triad. The developer, tester, and customer that are all responsible for the quality of the product. And what we're going to do is a process called behavior-driven development or acceptance test-driven development. And what happens is a triad describes the desired behavior of the system. And here's one principle. No code goes in until the test goes on. That means we're not going to implement anything until we have a test that tells us whether that implementation is expressing the desired behavior. Let's give an example here. If the customer rating is good and the order total is less than or equal to $10, then do not give a discount. Otherwise, give a 1% discount. If the customer rating is excellent, then give a discount of 1% for any order. And finally, if the order total is greater than $50, then give a discount of 5%. I have a question. What discount should there be for a good customer and a $50.01 order total? Now, this business rule has been written to be deliberately ambiguous. Nobody writes deliberately ambiguous business rules. But what if this happens? Well, the developer might read it and say, looks like it should be 1% to me. The tester could read and say, nah, it's 5%. Tester takes the developer's implementation, writes up a defect. They get together, determine that probably it should be 6%. Goes to production at 6%. That's too big of a discount. The company goes bankrupt. So what we're going to do is come up with some examples that will be turned into tests. Given our order total is $50.01 and a customer rating of good, when we compute the discount percentage, then it should be 1%. And the triad all agrees. We'll also come with other examples for the remainder of the business rules. $10 gives us 0%, $10.01 gives us 1%. And similarly for excellent. Excellent at 1% until we get to the $50, And finally, at $50.01, we get the 5%. We've got our examples. Turn them into tests. Now we could use a ATDD BDD framework, such as Cucumber or SpecFlow, which uses what's called the Gherkin syntax, which looks like this. Here's a scenario outline for computing the discount. Given our total is order total and rating is customer rating. When the discount is computed, then the percent is discount percentage. And we have those examples. Now we have an automatable test against our implementation. What have we done through this process? Well, we have replaced our misunderstanding with shared understanding. So it turns out that requirements and tests are coupled. For example, if there is a failing test that must pass in order for the system to be shipped, that's a requirement. And the passing tests actually specify how the system works. So requirements and tests are interrelated. You can't have one without the other. That's just a little ditty to help you remember that relationship. So now let's look at our flow with tests. We still do the decision, but in analysis time, we analyze with our tests, creating our shared understanding. We design with the test to make testable code. We code with the test to make sure our implementation works. We still may do a little testing for an end-to-end testing or some performance testing. We'll deploy with our test, and finally we'll send it to production for execution. With all these tests, these loopbacks, these blockages in flow start to disappear. From test back to code, back to analysis, and finally those from production. And our flow now becomes much greater. So here are some results that corporations I've taught at have reported. Workflows are working the first time. Crisp, visible story completion criteria. The tests for the details of the requirements. Getting the business rule right. Rework down dramatically. And tighter cross-functional team integration. Those are from larger organizations. Here's a report from one team a couple of months after they adopted BDD ATDD. The team happiness factor increased. More distributed testing efforts across the sprint. The lead developer and tester are much happier. They help create the we are a team feeling. Less stress on the testers. Fewer production and test environment defects, and less rework due to miscommunication. If you'd like to experience these results, I invite you to experience BDD and ATDD in one of my workshops. Lean Agile Acceptance Test Driven, Behavior Driven Development, Better Software Through Collaboration. And that involves the triad, the developer, tester, and customer, i.e. your product owner, business analyst, or subject matter experts. And we're going to use the team's real stories for these exercises. And that consists of 5 half days. The first 2 half days, all the teams are together. And for the last 3 days, we take each team and work through the requirements and their particular domain and how to apply BDD in their domain. I also have behavior-focused, test-driven development and design. And that's 5 half days with breakout sessions for pairs, 2 developers or a developer and a tester. If you'd like more information, contact me on LinkedIn at Ken Pugh or email me, ken@kenpugh.com. Thanks for listening and take care.